blood mixed with expensive lipstick as the waiting room door slammed shut. The man I loved for 4 years just slapped me to the floor over the stained silk dress of a dead woman. He thought that blow would break my will, forcing me down the aisle like a soulless puppet, but he had no idea that the exact second my face hit the cold marble, I signed the permanent death warrant for his entire empire and pride. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Brinley Perry. I am a senior data analyst working at Axiom Vanguard Analytics. My daily life revolved around predictive modeling, risk assessment, and extracting undeniable truths from oceans of information. My career was on a brilliant and rapid upward trajectory. I was respected by my peers and trusted by the executive board. I dealt with pure logic every single day. I truly believed my sharp, analytical mind could protect me from any form of deception. I assumed I could calculate the risks in any situation, including romance, but I was entirely wrong. The human heart does not follow a predictable algorithm, and emotional manipulation does not present itself on a spreadsheet. I met Julian Vance at an extravagant charity gala in the heart of Austin exactly 4 years ago. He was the director of a rising technology startup. From the very moment he confidently walked across the ballroom floor and approached me with 2 glasses of expensive champagne, I was completely captivated. Julian was the absolute epitome of perfection. He was charming, articulate, and possessed a flawless smile that seemed to stop time. He knew exactly how to pamper a woman. He remembered my favorite type of orchid after only one conversation, surprised me with reservations at the most exclusive restaurants in the city, and made me feel like I was the singular center of his entire universe. I felt cherished. I fell deeply and blindly into what I thought was a perfect love story. However, the signs of his intense control started early. They were incredibly subtle, sweetly wrapped in the deceptive guise of excessive care and devotion. It began with my wardrobe choices. I would put on a vibrant emerald dress for a dinner date, and Julian would gently wrap his arms around my waist, kissing my cheek before whispering, "You always look beautiful, my darling. But do you not think that pale lavender silk blouse flatters your delicate skin tone so much more?" Then, the control extended to my meals. He would take the menu from my hands at luxury dining establishments, smoothly ordering for me while claiming he knew exactly what my sophisticated palate craved. He managed my schedule, insisting I needed more rest and fewer late nights at the office. I thought his actions were incredibly romantic. I failed to realize I was slowly being stripped of my autonomy and forced into a meticulously crafted mold. That mold belonged to a ghost. It had a name: Serafina. She was Julian's older sister, who had tragically passed away several years before we even met. To say the Vance family merely mourned her loss would be a massive understatement. They worshipped her. Serafina was treated as an untouchable religion in their sprawling estate. Her childhood bedroom remained perfectly preserved, seemingly frozen in time, completely untouched by a single speck of dust. Every family dinner conversation inevitably circled back to her unmatched grace, her brilliant mind, and her ethereal beauty. Initially, I deeply sympathized with their profound, unyielding grief. I wanted nothing more than to be the supportive, understanding partner that Julian needed to heal his broken heart. But their grief was not a passive, quiet shadow. It was an active, consuming, and demanding force. The gentle suggestions about my wardrobe soon transformed into silent expectations. My closet was entirely purged of bright colors and modern cuts, replaced by muted pastels, vintage lace, and flowing skirts. It was exactly the style Serafina used to wear. My personal hobbies, like outdoor rock climbing and painting vibrant, abstract art, were quietly pushed out of my life because Julian insisted they were far too chaotic and dangerous for a woman of my refined elegance. He even meticulously persuaded me to alter my appearance. I had always worn my dark hair in a sharp, professional bob. One Saturday afternoon, he brought an exclusive stylist directly to our penthouse. "Just try growing it out to your shoulders, my love, and let us add some soft, cascading waves," he coaxed with a loving smile. "It would make my mother and me so incredibly happy." Months later, I looked into the mirror and barely recognized the reflection. The woman staring back at me was a ghostly echo of the hundreds of photographs that lined the halls of the Vance estate. I was actively being molded into a living replica of Serafina. The absolute peak of this suffocating absurdity arrived during the final weeks of our wedding preparations. I had spent countless hours and thousands of dollars working with a renowned international designer to custom make an exquisite haute couture gown. It was a masterpiece of modern elegance, a dress that perfectly represented my personal taste, my professional success, and my true identity. 3 weeks before the grand ceremony, Julian's mother invited me to the family estate for afternoon tea. She sat directly across from me, her eyes cold and calculating beneath a thin veneer of maternal warmth. She leaned forward and said, "Brinley, my dear, it would mean the absolute world to this grieving family if you honored our beloved Serafina on your special day." Then, she signaled a maid who brought out a massive, yellowing preservation box. Inside lay Serafina's old wedding dress. It was an archaic, heavy, and bizarrely fashioned garment with suffocating high lace collars and excessive layers of heavy tulle. It looked more like a theatrical mourning costume than a celebration of love. Julian's mother demanded I wear that decaying fabric instead of my stunning custom gown. My soul cried out in fierce defiance. Every rational instinct I possessed warned me that this demand was utterly perverse, a sick scheme to completely obliterate my presence on the most significant day of my life. I turned to Julian, hoping for his defense. He simply squeezed my hands with bone-crushing intensity, his expression begging me to cave in, to swallow my self-respect and maintain the fragile harmony of his family. I adored him. I deeply cherished the person I assumed he was. Therefore, I compelled myself to tolerate it. I engaged my logical brain to make sense of the absolute lunacy occurring right in front of me. I frantically reasoned that immense sorrow drives individuals to act in bizarre, unpredictable ways. I persuaded my spirit that putting on a strip of aged fabric for a brief duration was a remarkably minor sacrifice for a guaranteed future of bliss with the man I desired most. I reasoned it was merely an innocent display of honor for the dead. I failed to recognize that I was voluntarily swathing my own identity in a deceased woman's funeral cloth, stepping blindly into a meticulously designed nightmare. The morning sun beat down relentlessly on the sprawling grounds of the private luxury resort, situated just outside the city limits of Austin. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the overwhelming scent of thousands of imported white roses that adorned every archway and aisle. Over 400 guests, representing the absolute pinnacle of the state's financial and technological elite, were already mingling on the manicured lawns. A renowned string quartet played a hauntingly beautiful melody in the background, masking the suffocating tension that had been building inside my chest since dawn. Waiters in pristine white tuxedos glided through the crowd, carrying trays of vintage champagne and delicate appetizers. Everything looked like the flawless cover of a high-society bridal magazine. It was a picture-perfect illusion masking a terrifying reality. I needed a moment of absolute silence before the ceremony began. I politely dismissed my team of makeup artists and hairstylists from the grand bridal suite, claiming I needed to center my thoughts and practice my vows one last time. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, leaving me completely alone in the massive room. The silence was instantly deafening. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing nerves, and turned toward the custom dressing alcove where my exquisite modern wedding gown was supposed to be waiting in pristine condition. My breath caught sharply in my throat. My heart violently slammed against my ribs, echoing loudly in my ears. There, Thrown carelessly onto the cold marble floor was my custom gown. It was not just dropped, it was maliciously and violently destroyed. The delicate silk bodice was completely shredded. Deep, jagged tears ripped through the intricate beadwork I had spent months meticulously selecting. The modern, elegant train was trampled and stained with dark, dirty smudges, exactly as if someone had intentionally wiped their muddy shoes across my carefully planned future. The sheer violence inflicted upon the fabric made my stomach churn with a sickening dread. This was no accident. This was a deliberate, calculated execution of my identity. A brutal message delivered in absolute silence. I slowly lifted my gaze from the ruined silk on the floor. Hanging exactly in the center of the room, positioned perfectly under the glittering crystal chandelier, was the heavy yellowing antique dress. Serafina's dress. It was suspended there like a victorious ghost, mocking my foolish attempts to hold on to my own self-worth. The high lace collar and thick, suffocating layers of vintage tulle seemed to absorb all the ambient light in the room. The Vance family had orchestrated this deeply cruel stage play while I was getting my hair styled. They had destroyed my choices to leave me with absolutely no alternative but to surrender completely to their grotesque obsession. They wanted to force me into a corner where defiance seemed impossible. Before I could even process the full magnitude of this betrayal, the suite door swung open with a sharp, aggressive click. Julian stepped inside, firmly locking the heavy door behind him. There was no gentle smile on his face today. The charming, affectionate man who had swept me off my feet 4 years ago was completely gone, evaporated into thin air. In his place stood a cold, calculated stranger with eyes as hard and unfeeling as flint. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking every inch the powerful corporate groom, but his posture radiated a menacing, impatient authority. He barely glanced at the shredded remains of my expensive dress on the marble floor. He registered the destruction with zero surprise. Confirming his absolute complicity, his eyes immediately locked onto the yellowing antique garment hanging under the chandelier. "Put it on," Julian commanded, his voice entirely devoid of any warmth or affection. It was a sterile, absolute order issued by a dictator. "The guests are waiting outside in the heat. My mother expects to see her beloved daughter's memory honored today. Stop wasting time staring at the floor and get dressed right now." A sudden, razor-sharp clarity sliced through the thick fog of denial I had been living in for months. The final velvet curtain had been violently torn down, exposing the ugly machinery behind our relationship. This was never about honoring a family tragedy. This was about total, unconditional submission. They wanted a hollow vessel, a compliant puppet to wear a dead woman's clothes and smile perfectly for the high society cameras. "No," I stated firmly, my voice remarkably steady despite the chaotic storm of panic and fury raging inside my mind. I stood up straight, squaring my shoulders and locking eyes with the man I thought I knew. "I will not wear it. I am Brinley Perry. I am a living, breathing woman, not a mannequin for your dead sister. I refuse to let you and your sick family erase my identity on my own wedding day." Julian's handsome features instantly twisted into a hideous, unrecognizable mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The blatant rejection snapped something dark and volatile inside his mind. He crossed the large suite in 3 massive, aggressive strides. Before I could even register his sudden movement or raise my hands to defend my face, he swung his arm with terrifying, brutal speed. The open palm of his hand struck my left cheek with the devastating force of a concrete block. The sharp, explosive crack of the impact echoed loudly against the high ceilings of the suite, a sound that will forever haunt my nightmares. The sheer physical power behind the vicious blow threw my entire body completely off balance. My vision exploded into a blinding flash of white light as I was forcefully hurled toward the ground. I crashed hard against the unforgiving marble floor, my shoulder taking the brutal brunt of the heavy fall. A loud ringing noise instantly deafened my left ear, drowning out the faint sounds of the string quartet playing outside. I lay there for a second, deeply disoriented, gasping for air as a sickening wave of severe dizziness washed over my brain. I tasted it then, the distinct metallic tang of fresh blood rapidly mixing with the expensive, deep red lipstick the makeup artist had applied just 45 minutes prior. The sickening taste coated my teeth as a warm, steady trickle escaped the corner of my split lip. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply froze, paralyzed by the sheer, incomprehensible reality that the man I loved had just violently assaulted me over a piece of stained antique silk. Julian did not step back in horror. He did not apologize or rush forward to help me up. Instead, he slowly crouched down beside me, his immaculate tuxedo pants casually brushing against the ruined fabric of my original dress. He grabbed a thick fistful of my carefully styled hair, forcefully yanking my head back so I was forced to look directly into his furious, soulless eyes. He leaned in so incredibly close I could feel the heat of his angry breath against my throbbing, burning cheek. "Listen to me very carefully. You ungrateful little fool," he hissed, his voice a venomous, low vibration that sent chills down my spine. "You will put on that dress right now, and you will walk down that aisle with a perfect, radiant smile on your face. If you dare try to cancel this wedding or make a public scene, I swear to God you will lose absolutely everything you have ever worked for. You think you are so smart and invincible with your prestigious corporate title? My tech startup is just days away from finalizing a massive merger contract with Axiom Vanguard Analytics, a lucrative contract that only exists because of your direct executive guarantee and your professional backing." He tightened his cruel grip on my hair, making me wince in sharp, sudden pain. "If you walk out that door today, I will personally ensure the entire board of directors blames you for the catastrophic collapse of a multi-million-dollar deal. I will ruin your flawless career overnight. I will drag your professional reputation through the mud until you are absolutely unemployable in the analytics industry. You are nothing without me and my family's connections. Now get up off the floor, wipe that pathetic blood off your face, and put on the damn dress." Julian released his harsh grip, turned on his heel, and walked out. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving me completely alone in the silent suite. Any ordinary bride might have curled into a ball, weeping over the shattered illusion of her perfect day. But I did not shed a single tear. The searing pain from my jaw did not break me. It acted as a violent catalyst, snapping every emotional bond I had left for the man who just assaulted me. The lingering fog of manipulation evaporated completely. In its place, a terrifyingly cold and absolute clarity settled over my mind. I was a senior data analyst. I specialized in dismantling complex systems, identifying vulnerabilities, and neutralizing threats with ruthless efficiency. Julian had just made the catastrophic error of treating a predator like prey. I pushed myself up from the cold marble floor. The metallic taste in my mouth was sharp, but my hands were completely steady. I walked over to the vanity, ignoring the ridiculous antique gown hanging like a grotesque specter in the room. I reached into my overnight bag and pulled out my tablet. I did not need his family connections to win this war. I had something far more potent. I had raw, undeniable data. 3 weeks prior, I secretly hired an independent audiovisual technician to install a microscopic, wide-angle lens camera seamlessly into the ornate crown molding directly above the vanity mirror. It was originally intended to capture candid, behind-the-scenes moments of my bridal preparation as a surprise gift for our wedding anniversary. It was supposed to record laughter and joy. Instead, it had just captured a severe felony. I quickly connected my tablet to the hidden wireless network bridging the camera. My fingers flew across the glass screen with practiced, lethal speed. I bypassed the security protocols and accessed the storage drive. There it was, a crystal clear, high-definition video file. I tapped the screen to review the footage. I watched from an elevated angle as Julian stormed into the room, his face contorted in rage. The audio was pristine, picking up every single venomous threat he hissed. Then came the physical strike, the violent motion, the sickening sound of flesh hitting bone, and my body crashing to the floor. It was all there, permanently documented in 100% undeniable clarity. I initiated a secure transfer, uploading the 2 GB file directly to my highly encrypted personal cloud servers, ensuring multiple backups existed across 3 different continents. The evidence was absolutely bulletproof, but simply securing the footage was not enough. Julian had threatened to destroy my career and ruin my life. He wanted to weaponize my professional standing against me. I decided to strike back with the very tools he mocked. Axiom Vanguard Analytics possessed proprietary security override software. Originally designed for penetrating massive corporate mainframes, I opened the application on my tablet. The resort network was shockingly primitive, practically an open door for someone of my caliber. Within 45 seconds, I had bypassed their firewall. I navigated through the digital infrastructure until I located the primary control node for the massive outdoor visual displays. The Vance family had erected 3 enormous, state-of-the-art LED screens around the altar to ensure all 400 guests had a perfect view of their manufactured fairy tale. I seized administrative control of the primary broadcasting software. I created a custom, overriding sequence, locking out the local audiovisual team from making any sudden interventions. I linked the video file from my cloud directly into the main projection queue. It was primed. All it required was a single keystroke from my device to unleash absolute destruction upon the Vance legacy. With the digital guillotine firmly in place, I turned my attention to my physical appearance. I walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. The water ran cold. I splashed it over my face, watching the pale pink mixture of water and blood swirl down the drain. I carefully wiped away the smeared lipstick. Using a high-coverage concealer from my makeup kit, I meticulously painted over the rising red welt on my cheek. I worked with the precision of a surgeon, blending the edges until the bruise was completely masked. I applied a fresh layer of neutral lip gloss. I checked my reflection. I looked composed, elegant, and chillingly empty. I ignored the shredded silk on the floor and the suffocating antique dress hanging above. Instead, I calmly put on my sleek, white silk dressing robe, sliding my arms into the sleeves and tying the sash tightly around my waist. It was the garment I arrived in, and it would be the armor I wore to execution. I picked up my tablet, holding it firmly at my side, and stepped out of the bridal suite. The heavy doors closed behind me with a final, decisive thud. Outside the grand estate, the string quartet was playing a soaring, triumphant crescendo. The bright morning sun illuminated the manicured lawns where hundreds of elite guests sat in eager anticipation. They were waiting for a subdued, obedient bride to walk down the aisle wrapped in the ghost of Serafina. They were completely unaware that a massive, uncontrollable hurricane was about to tear their perfect world to absolute shreds. The colossal double doors at the end of the grand floral walkway swung open on their heavy brass hinges. The string quartet, cued by an overly enthusiastic wedding planner, instantly swelled into a majestic classical arrangement. 400 of the most influential individuals in the state rose to their feet in perfect unison, turning their expectant faces toward the entrance. They were waiting for a grand spectacle of vintage mourning, fully anticipating a subdued bride smothered in heavy, antique lace. Instead, they got me. I stepped out into the blinding midday sun wearing only my simple, sleek white silk dressing robe, tightly belted at my waist, with my digital tablet firmly gripped in my right hand. A collective gasp, sharp and violently sudden, swept across the expansive, perfectly manicured lawn. The synchronized turning of heads was almost mechanical, a wave of pure shock rippling through the elite crowd. The lead violinist of the quartet visibly faltered. His bow slipped awkwardly across the delicate strings, creating a jarring, discordant screech that hung painfully in the thick, humid air. The beautiful music stumbled, broke into a confused jumble of dying notes, and finally faded away completely, leaving an oppressive, heavy silence in its wake. I began my slow, deliberate walk down the long, white, carpeted aisle. I did not look down at the ground. I kept my head held exceptionally high, my posture rigidly straight, locking my eyes directly on the man standing beneath the elaborate archway constructed of 10,000 imported white roses. Julian stood next to the elderly, dignified minister. For a fleeting fraction of a second, Julian maintained his rehearsed, charming, camera-ready smile. But as I drew closer, the severe reality of my improper attire and my unbroken defiance slammed into him with the force of a speeding train. The fake, charming smile violently cracked and fell away from his handsome face, immediately replaced by a pale, sickly pallor of absolute panic. I watched his perfectly manicured hands begin to tremble slightly by his sides. His dark eyes darted frantically, scanning my empty hands, my missing floral bouquet, and the total absence of his dead sister's suffocating dress. He opened his mouth, perhaps to hiss a vicious command or to call for security, but the sheer, unadulterated shock had temporarily paralyzed his vocal cords. I did not walk all the way up the carpeted steps to the elevated altar. I stopped exactly 10 feet away, positioning myself strategically in the exact center of the vast arrangement of guest seating. The silence was now absolute, broken only by the gentle rustle of the warm summer breeze blowing through the ancient oak trees. To my left, a beautifully decorated wooden podium stood holding a wireless microphone originally intended for the reading of carefully curated, romantic poetry. I stepped toward it, calmly lifting the heavy microphone from its metal stand. I did not look at Julian. I turned to face the vast sea of bewildered, extremely wealthy faces staring at me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice echoing clearly and powerfully through the expensive, state-of-the-art surround sound system hidden seamlessly throughout the garden. My tone was utterly devoid of sadness, fear, or hesitation. It was the precise, commanding, and unshakable tone I use during critical corporate boardroom presentations. I would like to sincerely thank every single one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to travel here today. However, I must explicitly inform you that there will be no wedding ceremony this afternoon. A massive, uncontrollable shockwave of confused whispers immediately erupted across the seated crowd. I raised my free hand slightly, demanding silence, and the murmurs died down almost instantly, replaced by breathless anticipation. "Julian Vance and I will not be exchanging vows," I continued, my voice slicing through the heavy air. "I know many of you are deeply confused. You were invited here today to witness the union of two prominent families, a joyous celebration of love, trust, and mutual respect. Instead, I am going to show you exactly the kind of man you are currently doing business with." I looked down at the tablet in my hand. I brought up the secure execution file I had prepared just minutes earlier in the shattered bridal suite. I looked right at Julian. His face was completely drained of all color. His eyes widened in absolute terror as his mind connected the dots. Realizing exactly what device I was holding and what I was capable of doing with it, he took a desperate, uncoordinated, lunging step forward off the raised altar, his hands reaching out wildly to stop me. "Brinley, do not do this," he hissed, his voice a frantic, pathetic, pleading whisper that barely carried past the front row of seats. I did not hesitate for a single microsecond. I firmly pressed the execution command on the illuminated glass screen. Instantly, the three massive, high-definition LED screens positioned strategically around the grand garden flickered to life. They were originally meant to display a live, romantic feed of our smiling faces during the vow exchange. Now, they broadcasted the crystal clear, flawlessly recorded footage from the hidden camera. The video started exactly at the moment Julian violently kicked the heavy door shut, because I had successfully hijacked the main audio control node. His venomous, controlling words blasted at maximum volume across the entire private estate. "Put it on!" His recorded voice thundered from the massive speakers, sounding like a furious, demonic entity echoing from the clear blue sky. "The guests are waiting outside in the heat. My mother expects to see her beloved daughter's memory honored today." The 400 guests sat absolutely frozen in pure, unadulterated horror. They heard my steady refusal, Then, they witnessed the brutal strike. The visual of Julian crossing the suite and violently slapping me to the floor was magnified to 20 feet tall on the glowing screens. The horrific, sharp cracking sound of his large hand violently colliding with my jaw exploded through the outdoor speakers. A brutal, deafening noise that made several well-dressed women in the front rows scream out loud in genuine terror. The audio flawlessly captured the heavy, sickening thud of my body hitting the hard marble floor. It captured his sinister, calculated threats about destroying my career and manipulating the upcoming massive merger with Axiom Vanguard Analytics. Total, unmitigated pandemonium immediately unleashed itself upon the pristine garden. The initial shock instantly mutated into explosive, uncontrollable outrage. Shouts of absolute disgust and loud gasps of sheer revulsion filled the air, completely drowning out the ambient sounds of nature. I watched with deep, satisfying vindication as the flawless, carefully manufactured facade of the Vance family shattered into a million irreparable pieces in real time. Julian stood completely frozen on the altar, his hands gripping his dark hair in absolute devastation, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization that his entire empire was burning to the ground right in front of him. His mother, the twisted architect of my torment, leaped from her front row seat, her face flushed a deep, terrifying shade of purple. "Turn it off!" she shrieked hysterically, her voice cracking as she waved her arms wildly at the frantic audiovisual technicians who were desperately and pointlessly hammering away on their completely locked-out keyboards. "This is a malicious lie. This is digitally altered. Someone turn those damn screens off immediately." His father rushed toward the wooden podium, his face contorted in rage, trying to aggressively grab the microphone from my hands. But before he could even get close, two of my senior male colleagues from Axiom Vanguard Analytics had already sprinted out from the third row. They firmly blocked his path, pushing the older man back with fierce, disgusted glares, creating an impenetrable human shield around me. The loud, desperate excuses of the Vance family were completely useless against the undeniable, visceral truth playing on an endless, unforgiving loop above their heads. The most powerful and intelligent people in the state were not fools. They knew raw, unedited footage when they saw it. I watched closely as the chief executive officer of the largest investment bank in the region, the primary financial backer for Julian's highly touted technology startup, stood up slowly from his seat. He did not say a single word. He simply buttoned his expensive, custom-tailored suit jacket, shot a look of pure, unadulterated contempt directly at Julian, turned his back on the floral altar, and began walking purposefully down the long aisle toward the main exit. His silent, decisive departure triggered a massive, unstoppable avalanche. Dozens of highly influential corporate partners, vital venture capital investors, and elite socialites immediately followed his exact lead. They stood up in massive droves, loudly kicking over the decorative white wooden chairs in their absolute haste to distance themselves from the radioactive wreckage of the Vance family. The loud, chaotic sound of hundreds of expensive leather shoes rapidly retreating down the gravel pathways was the sweetest, most vindicating music my ears had ever experienced. I stood firmly in the center of the collapsing empire, entirely untouchable, watching the cruel architects of my suffering drown completely in a torrential, devastating flood of their own making. Even before the last of the outraged guests could reach the valet parking stations, the sharp, piercing wail of police sirens tore through the humid afternoon air. I had contacted the local authorities exactly 20 minutes prior to leaving my dressing room, providing them with a clear, concise report of domestic assault accompanied by immediate digital evidence. 3 heavily marked patrol vehicles sped up the long, circular gravel driveway, their red and blue lights flashing violently against the pristine white floral arrangements. 4 armed officers stepped out and marched directly through the chaotic crowd toward the raised altar. They did not hesitate or show any deference to the immense wealth surrounding them. 2 officers forcefully grabbed Julian by his arms, twisting them firmly behind his back, and locked heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists right over the sleeves of his immaculate, custom-tailored black tuxedo. They loudly read him his Miranda rights in front of the straggling guests, the resort staff, and his horrified parents. The man who had demanded my absolute submission just an hour earlier was now being shoved roughly into the back of a police cruiser like a common street criminal. His face buried deep into his chest in absolute, paralyzing shame. The fallout was instantaneous and utterly catastrophic. By 7 o'clock that same evening, the raw footage from the LED screens had been recorded on dozens of smartphones and uploaded across every major social media platform. It went viral with terrifying speed. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the horrific incident dominated the front pages of every local financial newspaper and prestigious tech blog in the state. The Austin Business Chronicle ran a devastating digital expose detailing the massive collapse of the so-called perfect society wedding. Julian's carefully curated public image, built over a decade of expensive public relations, was completely pulverized overnight. He was no longer a visionary technology director. He was a publicly exposed, violently abusive fraud. The professional execution occurred with equal, ruthless efficiency. At precisely 8 o'clock on Monday morning, the executive board of Axiom Vanguard Analytics convened an emergency session. My senior colleagues, who had witnessed the atrocity firsthand, had already briefed the chief executive officer. By 9 o'clock. Our elite legal team formally dispatched an immediate termination notice regarding the pending multi-million-dollar merger with Julian's startup. But my company did not simply walk away. They launched a massive, aggressive lawsuit against Julian personally, citing severe breach of contract, corporate fraud, and malicious intent to coerce an executive guarantee through physical intimidation. They froze all preliminary financial transfers and demanded total compensation for the legal resources wasted on the negotiations. Without the promised capital injection from Axiom Vanguard Analytics, Julian's technology startup was left completely exposed and financially bleeding. The viral scandal had sent his primary venture capital backers running for the absolute furthest hills. No reputable financial institution would ever risk associating their brand with his violently toxic name. His company accounts ran dry. Employees, realizing their paychecks would bounce, abandoned the office in droves by Wednesday. In exactly 6 days following the canceled wedding, his highly touted startup formally filed for immediate bankruptcy, its digital assets seized by angry creditors before the weekend even began. The collateral damage rapidly engulfed the entire Vance family. They had arrogantly leveraged their massive personal estate and numerous luxury assets to secure the early-stage funding for Julian's company, fully believing my corporate influence would guarantee their financial victory. Now, with the startup completely dead and massive corporate lawsuits piling up on their doorstep, the creditors descended upon them like starving vultures. The family faced a relentless barrage of financial claims from outraged investors who demanded their millions of dollars back immediately. To avoid complete federal prosecution for defaulting on their massive loans, the Vance family was forced into humiliating, rapid asset liquidation. They had to sell their fleet of expensive imported cars, their extensive private art collection, and finally, they were forced to put their sprawling, prestigious estate up for public auction. The local high society, the very people they had desperately tried to impress, completely shunned them. Their country club memberships were quietly revoked, and former friends refused to answer their desperate phone calls. Julian's mother, the manipulative, cruel architect who had tried to erase my identity to feed her twisted obsession, completely mentally collapsed under the crushing weight of the public humiliation. Her precious social standing, the only thing she valued in her empty life, was permanently eradicated. She lost the massive house that held the perfectly preserved shrine to her dead daughter. She was left drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of inescapable debt, completely isolated, and forced to move into a tiny, run-down rental apartment on the desolate outskirts of the city. There was no one left to manipulate, no wealth left to hide behind, and absolutely no one willing to throw her a single lifeline. The grand, arrogant empire of the Vance family was completely reduced to worthless ashes in less than 168 hours. I immediately handed over every single piece of digital evidence, including the encrypted cloud backups and the server logs, to the most formidable prosecuting attorney in the city of Austin. In the weeks that followed, the remnants of the Vance family sent countless desperate letters and left dozens of pathetic voicemails. They offered massive financial settlements, tearful apologies, and begged for a private mediation. I firmly instructed my legal team to reject every single offer without a second thought. There was absolutely no amount of money in this world that could buy my silence or erase the violence I had endured. The legal system moved with brutal efficiency. The police did not just stop at the assault charges. The massive fraud lawsuit filed by my company triggered a deeper, extensive federal investigation into his corporate practices. The authorities uncovered years of severe financial manipulation. During his final criminal trial, the judge showed zero leniency. Julian was officially sentenced to 8 long months in a state penitentiary for aggravated assault, followed by 5 years of strict probation. Furthermore, due to the extensive fraud convictions, the federal court handed down a lifetime ban prohibiting him from ever holding an executive position or operating within the technology sector again. While Julian was violently stripped of his freedom and his future, I was finally building mine. I packed up the few belongings that truly belonged to me and signed a lease for a stunning, ultra-modern penthouse apartment located on the highest floor of a magnificent glass skyscraper right in the vibrant center of downtown Austin. My new home was bathed in brilliant natural light. There were no dusty antiques, no muted pastel curtains, and absolutely no ghosts haunting the halls. I decorated the expansive walls with vibrant, chaotic abstract paintings and filled the rooms with bright, bold colors that reflected my true soul. I started indoor rock climbing again, relishing the physical strength and absolute freedom of my own body. My professional life mirrored my personal resurrection. Instead of punishing me for the chaotic media spectacle, the executive board at Axiom Vanguard Analytics deeply admired my ruthless efficiency and my unwavering composure under extreme pressure. I had successfully navigated the company out of a disastrous merger and saved them millions of dollars. Within 2 short months, I was officially promoted to the highly coveted position of Executive Project Director. I was given my own corner office, a massive team of brilliant analysts, and a salary that completely secured my absolute independence. The final chapter of my past concluded on a crisp, bright Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. It was the day of Julian's formal sentencing and his transfer to the state prison. I attended the hearing, taking a seat in the very back row. When the bailiff escorted Julian into the courtroom, the sight was almost unrecognizable. The impeccably groomed, arrogant technology director was completely gone. In his place was a hollow, trembling shell of a man. His designer suits were replaced by an ill-fitting, bright orange prison jumpsuit. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken and completely devoid of that arrogant, commanding light. As the guards prepared to lead him away through the side doors, his desperate eyes scanned the courtroom and finally locked onto mine. He stopped walking. A pathetic, pleading look washed over his exhausted face. He silently mouthed the word sorry, begging for some tiny fraction of forgiveness, hoping to find a shred of the sympathetic woman he used to control. I stood up slowly and walked down the central aisle, the sharp click of my high heels echoing loudly against the polished wooden floors. The guards hesitated for a brief moment, allowing me to approach the wooden partition. I leaned in close, bringing my face just inches from his ear. I did not raise my voice. I spoke in a gentle, melodic whisper, exactly like a lover sharing a sweet secret. "I forgive you, Julian," I murmured softly. "But there is one final thing you need to know before you go away. When your company was being liquidated for absolute pennies during the bankruptcy auction, a private, anonymous shell corporation quietly purchased every single one of your proprietary assets, the algorithms, the software codes, the patents you spent your entire adult life meticulously building. They do not belong to the bank anymore." I pulled back slightly, letting a slow, beautiful smile spread across my face as I looked directly into his terrified eyes. "I own them," I whispered. "I used a proxy firm to buy your life's work for less than $10,000. Axiom is integrating your patents into our new system next week. Your legacy is officially mine, and you will never see a single dime of it." The raw, unadulterated horror that instantly shattered his face was the most exquisite masterpiece I had ever seen. His knees physically buckled, and he let out a choked, devastated sob as the heavy realization crushed the very last breath out of his soul. The guards firmly grabbed his arms, dragging his dead weight through the heavy doors and into the dark holding cells. I turned my back on the courtroom and walked out through the grand entrance. The heavy brass doors pushed open, and I stepped out into the brilliant, blinding sunshine of the Texas morning. I took a deep, unrestricted breath of the warm air. I was completely free. I had taken a violently shattered dream and forged it into an unbreakable armor. I left the man who tried to bury me rotting in a hell of absolute infamy, totally empty-handed, and drowning in ultimate, incurable despair. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Violet Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.